Hi there, and welcome to another interview. Today, I got the fabulous Helen with me, who I was lucky enough to meet at a public health collaboration conference way back in April, and here we are in September. That's how busy she is. And I'm going to ask Helen the same question I ask absolutely everybody. Hey, Helen, why did you become carnivore?
Thank you so much for having me on, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be here. I became fully carnivore in February this year. I found out about it towards the end of last year. And to me, if I'm brutally honest, it's because it made sense. All of a sudden, things started making sense to me. And that everything that we see on the aisles in the supermarket, all of a sudden, actually, hang on a minute, that's not food anymore. Food, we never used to have all this stuff, but then hang on a minute, we never used to have the disease we have either. And I think on a personal level for me, I'd had a full hysterectomy early on in my 40s. And so that drove me straight into menopause and all this sort of stuff. And I'd got brain fog, I'd got aches and pains. I thought I was losing it completely and going crazy. And then the more research that I did, I realized that there were elements of a meat-only diet or protein and fat-only diet that were going to be significantly helpful for me to not only aid with the imbalances that had happened, but also better longevity as I sort of gained in my, I'm going to say, chronological age as opposed to biological age.
Brilliant, thank you. So for those people that don't know, how do they arrive at, they being the medical profession or doctors, physicians, how do they arrive at the decision that a hysterectomy is the answer to whatever you're suffering?
I think for me, I was suffering, and this was obviously before I sort of woke up to quite a few things really. For me, I just had such heavy periods all my life. And I was put on the pill, as we're told we should go on the pill from about the age of 14, 15. But that still didn't stop the incredible, I would take 2 weeks out of my month and I would just be, bad for the week leading up and then in bed for a couple of days. And all I never got, no blood tests were checked, no hormones were checked. I was just thrown a pill and gone, oh, okay, well, that's fine. And the main element, the main push on that was, oh, so you don't get pregnant. I mean, I was 14 at the time. I had no idea what was going on with me at that point. But then that carried on all through my 20s, my 30s. I'd never wanted to conceive. That was my choice. I'd never been interested in that. But then I just had, in 2010, I just had consistent bleeds. They found, I had an internal examination. They found a 2-centimeter polyp, which had gone bad, is the best way of putting it. And it got all sorts of things growing inside it. And then from then, it just became a constant visit with hospitals and consultants and scans and checks. And I just got tired in the end. But it got to the point where my consultant said to me, you're 42, your womb lining's really thickened again, let's just take it out. And at that point, that's what I chose to do. In hindsight, it was the wrong thing to do. But in foresight, I can only fix what I've got left.
Okay. Oh, well, there's a lot there in that one little remark about in hindsight. Right. So I'm going to ask you two things. What do you mean by that? In hindsight, it was the wrong thing to do. So why was it wrong? And secondly, what was it that you did that got you to that place in the first instance?
So in answer to your first question, had I have had any of my hormones checked, I believe that I was probably progesterone deficient all my life. Not only progesterone deficient, but I think there were probably elements of my, I always forget the name of it, pregnenolone and my DHEA that also could have been evened out. But of course, these are things that just aren't looked at by the NHS. So, and clearly things weren't, this is what happens when you have menopause. Your brain goes blank. No, vitamins and minerals and all sorts of things weren't analysed. So there were imbalances that I think were key that could have brought me back into balance. I think something else which is quite interesting to note was both my mother and father were quite old when I was born. So there could be something, and this is with my epigenetic genetic brain on, that could have caused that too.
Yes. Now, you've just alluded to the next question, because all this happened. Was this why you got into studying and taking the master's degree?
Partly. I mean, I had a successful aesthetics beauty business. So for me, and ever since I'd opened it, which is over 20 years ago now, I'd go to beauty shows and they'd tell me these creams were the next miracle cream. And I'd be like, yeah, but how? But how is this cream? Tell me on a molecular level, why are you telling me that this works? And no one could ever do that for me, and then I think the science kind of caught up in the sense that they started to use these words called nanotechnology, but even then they still didn't have the clinical science to back it up. And I think that sort of you're right in some respects, sort of from my hysterectomy and onwards, then I'm started to go, things aren't right. I need to find out more and understand more. And it kind of has snowballed since then.
So what do you think you have learned that you'd like to share with the public? Is there some sort of root principle or some of the things we've been told all our life that just simply aren't true?
Oh, eat fat. Oh, for goodness sake, everybody just get off the bandwagon that fat is bad and realise that no, your body is made up of so much fat and requires fat to live.
To thrive.
To thrive completely. And people think I'm crazy. And I'm like, I don't think so. I'm not alone. But,
yes.
And I think people really need to have a look and wake up to the information they're being told, and to question everything. Question why they've got to do X instead of Y.
Yes, and I think it was beautifully summed up when you said that these people came with these wonderful creams that are going to make you look 20 years younger, and you didn't just go, okay, I believe everything. You just said, well, why? How did it do that? How does it do that?
Yeah, and I think they always say, don't you, in the terrible twos, it's always the asking why. I think I missed it when I was 2, and I've just done it in my whole adult life instead, and just ask why. And it amazes me how much people just accept what they're told without questioning anything. And it just, I was with somebody last week, I won't say who, they might watch this, but they surprised me when I said, oh, what do your kids have for breakfast, for example? And they said, oh, Cocoa Pops, it's good for them to have sugar. I physically couldn't say anything at that point, It's like this misinformation out there that sugar and fat is bad and sugar's okay. It's just what's bringing all this disease in, and it's so frustrating.
Yes, and it doesn't make any common sense either. When you look at, say, the animal kingdom, for instance.
They didn't ask for sugar in their tea, did they?
No,
tea.
No animals that are optimal because they're not having sugar. I mean, just anyway, right. Epigenetics is a posh word. Some people really understand it. For those that are interested, I mean, this is your area of expertise amongst many other things. Could you just explain epigenetics first in very layman's terms, and for those that are going to go, yes, but why? Maybe a bit more depth.
Okay, so epigenetics, everyone's heard of genetics, which is, you have 50% of the genes from your mother and 50% from your father, and that's how you are created. So that is effectively what I like to see as your hardware. So if you think of a computer, that is your hardware. That is what you're hard-coded to do. Your epigenetics is effectively what can switch those genes on and off. So how you live your life will depend upon and how you eat, how you are happy and sad, and any traumas that you go through will all be relevant to how those different things effectively switch your genes on and off.
I mean, it's that simple, isn't it?
It was that layman's enough, because sometimes I can be told for being too intense.
No, I think that's really good, because I am a product of that thinking before my eyes were opened. I lost both my parents to cancer very early in my life. And when I got lower left quadrant pain, I thought, wow, I'm going to die exactly like my mum did with colon cancer, even though both of us had been avoiding fat and red meat and eating blueberries and skim milk and porridge oats and having sugar because we were having fruit and lots of veg. So I just thought, this is my number. This is my number. Here I am at 60, and I changed my epigenetics were that I decided to go low carb. I'd always done activity. I was an advanced personal trainer, still do a bit of that. And it changed my life, just changing my food. So this is where you get into things like phenotype. What is my phenotype? Well, all that means is how I'm choosing to live my life. And, you know, to add to your sort of arsenal of being layman's, I know that it's not genetics because I have clients that are identical twins. And they'll say, my brother doesn't do any of this and he's really sick and ill and I'm not. So they've got the same genetics, or even just in one person.
Absolutely.
If I get someone reverse their type 2 diabetes, I don't say, we've changed your genes as well, haven't we? Because that's not what's happened.
No. And I think obviously the genetic element and the reading of the genome and all of that was the start of it, of understanding that. And that's great. However, the epigenetic element of it, the ability with epigenetics to predict disease, to see. So one of the clinical trials I reviewed during my thesis, for example, was all about trauma in children, and how that can then move into an epigenetic pattern as those children grow up, and then could create a susceptibility for depression and anxiety and all these sorts of things. But so your epigenetics, and this is also true, your body forgets nothing. Even though your mind may have done, your body, your cells, the trauma, anything that you've put your body through, it remembers everything. So it's quite a library of information.
Yes. And again, I'll go back to animals, and I'll go back to my own dog, actually. Many, many years ago, we've had him 4.5 years. So in the first 6 months, I think my wife Jane dropped a bag and it hit him, and he's petrified of bags. You know, it was accident, pure accident. That was 4 years ago. But even yesterday when I came back from the conference and I put my bag down, I was like, "Whoa, got to be careful of bags."
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. It seems so obvious to me that how we live a life is much more important.
Absolutely. And the stress. And I also think about living in the now. We're all guilty of what we're doing next week, what we're doing next month, all this 5-year planning, you know, or 10-year planning. Whoa. What about right here, right now? So my main focus and nothing else, I am talking to you. And that's it. I'm not thinking about anything else, because that's how you live in the now. And I think all of those things alongside, so your lifestyle choices alongside how you choose to maintain your body, because it's the only vessel you've got to live in. And I think people forget that. It's so crucial to think about it and be aware of it.
Yes.
Than just abuse it and think, oh, it'll be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've dived forward because I wanted to get to the fact that you know your stuff. You got your master's degree, and I'm going to go back to your decision to be carnivore, because I want to ask a couple of questions about that.
Sure.
What improvements did you see when you went carnivore?
Initially, it was really hard. I'm not going to lie. It was really hard, but it was more about I think my brain was a lot clearer, a lot clearer within a couple of months, 6 or 8 weeks, the brain was a lot clearer. I think pain, the reduction of pain, I've got some arthritic areas of my body which don't seem to give me any problems like they used to at all before. Just walking or exercise wise, I seem to be able to go on for longer, which is great. I don't do much, I have to admit, because that's quite a benefit in some respects, but I am very wary of my strength. But overall, I'm a lot calmer, and I think I'm more like I used to be. And that's, and no one else will know that, but pre-hysterectomy, I was always quite, on the go. But I seem to take quite a step back and go quite into lethargy and well, couldn't be bothered. Whereas now I'm very much more, I'm on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a huge thing. And was it quite quick to see the improvements?
Yeah, like I say, probably about 6 to 8 weeks. But I think now where am I? 8, 9 months in. I must be fat adapted by now. I must be. Like my body shape has changed. I haven't got as much sort of overall inflammation. You can just tell when I looked at my feet the other day. Stupid thing, really. But I was like, oh, they're looking quite slender, aren't they? Whereas before they probably looked a bit puffier. And I think that's the inflammation seems to have reduced quite considerably. Yeah, and overall, I just feel I feel like I mean this in the way that I say it, literally, in that I feel like I've got a second chance.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I think a lot of us feel like that.
Yes.
That's what I was alluding to. I genuinely thought in my late 40s, this is it. This is it. I sat in that room waiting for the colonoscopy results to be given to me, and I genuinely thought that was my lot. I think I probably phrased the last question incorrectly. What I meant to ask was, did it surprise you how quick it was? I mean,
yes. I'll be honest, yes. But at the same time, that in my mind, like I said to you earlier on, it made total sense to me. But that's just for me, I think it's really important that the person chooses to buy into what you're doing and understand it. I'm not here to say everybody should be carnivore. I think you've got to go on your own path to find it. And it makes sense.
Yeah. So you've been interested in aesthetics for a long time. Has it made you that part of your...
So I don't really, I don't do hardly anything now, treatment-wise, that I used to always be, because I suppose having a clinic, there's always that a bit of pressure on you, really, because you've got a clinic. If I didn't quite look right, then people might question the benefits of coming to my clinic. But I think the things that I have stopped is chemical products. I don't have any chemical products. If I'm going to wash my face or use anything, it's tallow. I mean, it's surprising, really, how good that stuff is. And so, yeah, it's an interesting one, but I still have to sort of, when I have people come in with different types of issues or questions, then I start from where I usually would, and then there's a conversation.
Yes. And do you feel more confident in the outcomes now you have this knowledge of almost going back to basics?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. You're one of the few people that's alluded to being an example in your profession, because I think that's true of carnivores. I downplay this. People think I look younger than I actually am. I'm 60, by the way, for those that don't know. But I always say, well, that's not really true. I think this is what you should look like. I think if you eat the proper way, a proper human diet, then you will reverse age and your skin will look good.
It goes back to the same thing, doesn't it? It's the fat.
Yes.
It's the glycation that you're getting from the sugar. It's all these sorts of things which age you that
Yes.
that people don't think about. The alcohol that they're consuming turns to sugar that will create in heavy lines and age them more so.
Yes. And it is so obvious to us now, looking back. And I think that's one of the things. I mean, hysterectomies are still carried out today in vast numbers. And you just think if you were eating correctly, you wouldn't need this horrific surgery. I mean, it is quite destructive to the body. Do you feel that these procedures are pushed too soon now? Do you think that the avenues of lifestyle just not pursued?
Oh, they're definitely not pursued, and I don't want to bash consultants or the NHS. It's not their fault necessarily. I believe that they just don't have the time to spend with the people, to educate the people, and I also think that there's a negative effect because I don't know about you, but I know that I was taught cookery at school. I was taught how to cook at school. Don't believe that's even on the curriculum these days. So people just think I'll get I don't know, pot noodle, stick some water in it, stick in a microwave. I don't even know how to make one. I'm just guessing. And that's their idea of nutrition. So I think the NHS, they have what, is it 6 minutes? I don't even know how long they have with a patient. They'll just get a book out and they'll just prescribe something, or they'll refer you on, and the surgeon will want to take things out. That's the surgeon's job. That's what he's been trained to do. But the thought that potentially, and you and I both know, that if you have a broken metabolism, subsequently that's going to cause a problem elsewhere down the line, well, that thought process wouldn't come into anybody's mind, would it?
Yes.
Other than ours.
So you mentioned earlier that you think you're progesterone deficient.
I was.
Oh, you was, yes.
Yeah.
Where did you get to that conclusion? How did that come about?
Because it sort of makes sense in the lines of, the excessive, not wanting to be too gory for people that are listening to this, but my when I bled, it was just horrific. It was beyond, and the pain that I was in leading up to it would, between myself and my hormone doctor, we kind of came to the conclusion, looking at the luteal phase, the whole phase of your body as a woman that goes through during the 28-day period. And when my pain came along, it was evident that that's when the ovulation had happened, and then it comes down and your progesterone should come back up. And it just wasn't, it didn't, that's what gave it away, really, the symptoms.
Yes. So when people get a blood panel and they get luteinizing hormone and FSH, sometimes they also include the sex hormone binding and TSH.
Yeah.
Is that a good test to get? An estradiol, obviously, is the other one. Is that a telling panel to get? Does that help people get to a conclusion?
It can do, but I don't know if the person isn't trained in looking at blood tests, then I wouldn't necessarily say that they would know what they were looking at. I think for me, though, there is a combination of looking at, I always look at the body as a whole in a 360 approach, because even though the hormones are raised, there could have been other things, but I haven't got the hindsight to look at my blood panels. I could only go on what my hormone doctor was telling me with my hormone panel at the time. So I think that there are other parts, your adrenals could be smoked, and that could be causing issues from a progesterone point of view. Progesterone, your pregnenolone, your progesterone going straight to cortisol after all. So, there are other areas that could have caused the reduction.
Yes, and it's interesting that you say that, because I deal with bloods, and most people are worried about just reading the estrogen or estradiol, I should say,
yeah.
But which is obviously estrogen. Why do you think that estrogen is the mainstream sort of main villain in everything women related?
I I don't know if I'm honest with you, but I would say that a lot of the agricultural foods probably plays a huge part in it, if I'm honest, because there are a lot of toxins, there are toxicity, there are a lot of molds, there are a lot of heavy metals which can drive these things ultimately, can't they? And they are precursors and disruptors of our systems in our body.
Which is the answer I was trying to get to go through. Yes, because we got glyphosate and we've got all these things.
Which is glyphosate, which is being sprayed on all of the grain, as well as the genetic modification to make it grow faster, to feed people quicker. It's just constant.
And that again goes back to epigenetics, because you're inputting that, ingesting it, and it's going to mimic hormones. It's going to disrupt, which is why they're called endocrine disruptors.
Yeah.
So in the most basic sense, this is possibly one of the reasons why carnivore is so successful, not necessarily because the meat is so good, but we're not eating the plants that are being chemically sprayed and grown in such a way which is horrific and causing a lot of death across the insect kingdom and microbial deaths in the soil. I think.
But also, people live near agriculture as well, and they're breathing that glyphosate in unknowingly. I've had a lot of that.
Yes, and I mean that's a big issue, because we can't control that. Although maybe we could if we weren't back in monocropping and this way of doing, going back to regenerative farming and all that. I think one of the things I'd like to ask you then is the practicalities, because I'll get comments if I don't ask this question. So, what is your day of eating looking like? What do you do?
So what have I had today? I've had 4 eggs and I had a piece of salmon and I've had some butter. That was my breakfast.
And are you doing every or one meal a day?
I vary actually. So at the moment I am 2 meals. So last night, for example, my other half looked at me quite gone out, but it worked for me. I had sardines and I had 2 beef burgers, but they were just beef and fat. So, that's all it was. So nothing else.
Yes, and it's so simple, isn't it? This way of eating.
That's the biggest thing. I don't have to think anymore, So simple.
Yes, it is. And there's no big cleanup operation, and you don't need hundreds of utensils, and there's not much preparation. It's great, isn't it?
Yeah, you don't have to think at all. It's great.
Yes. Now, you've done your degree and your master's degree, which I think is great. What is your title then? What is your degree?
So my master's was in biomedical science. It was integrative and genomic medicine. I haven't to think, because it was regenerative medicine and genomic and regenerative medicine. But then I specialised in cellular and molecular immunology.
So what's next for you then?
Well, I'm doing a few other courses in some various, coaching, and I'm doing some extra nutritional stuff. I've got, I'm quite interested in iridology. I'm quite interested in live blood analysis. So there are some areas of interest. And this is what I mean. I was never good at school. I academically, I didn't do academia at all. So for me, doing the masters kind of opened my brain, and I'm just on it all the time, reading everything. Never stop.
Yeah, that's brilliant. What is it about live blood analysis that floats your boat?
I just like to see if the cells are stuck together, because I think that's really interesting from my perspective. If the cells are stuck together, if there's any oxalates in there, if there is a bacterial infection, straight away you can see. There are. If the cells are clumped together, then you've got an element of sticky blood, or that there are issues. So again, going down to a cellular level and me getting, I'm sort of delving in. What can I see? I'm sure there's an answer somewhere. And some people don't like having blood tests done, so it kind of gives me another avenue, which makes it intriguing, and it's not usual. So because it's a little bit different, I'm going to like it.
Yeah. So for those people that are interested, could you just go through how that actually happens? What do you do to have?
So what you do is you just prick the finger, and then I would take that blood. It has to be done in person. I would take that blood, I would put it on a slide and put it straight under a microscope. And there and then we can see the cells in your blood, and we can see what's going on.
And how is that different to a blood test?
Well, in a blood test, it takes 24 hours for that to get to the lab. That element of things isn't looked at in that minutiae of detail that we can see live cells moving across. So, and when they don't look for oxalates, they don't look for all the different types of things that you could see there and then straight away under a microscope.
And is it expensive, Helen?
No, treatments start from $250.
Brilliant. And how do people get in contact with you if they're interested in this?
So they can look me up on my website, which is houseofavexia.com, or maybe we can put my details on this podcast.
We will. We'll put the details in the description. I will ask you after we're off if you could send me the links you want me to push out, and
sure.
If people are interested. I often talk about the different types of bloods because I'm a phlebotomist, so I tend to do the bloods that are through the post, through samples, venous draws and all that, but also dry blood tests. Live blood analysis is just such a great field, and it's really nice to have an expert that I can recommend people go to if they want to do live blood.
Thank you.
Do you think that it should be used more in disease diagnostics? Yeah.
I think it's really a valuable tool. I think everything, a bit like the epigenetic tests, the methylation tests, all these sorts of tests they're just more tools in your toolbox, aren't they? Really, more things to be able to get to the root cause quicker. And I think the problem is that if you get to the root cause, then that stops you from taking medication, doesn't it?
Yes. And do you think that there is, I know you're there and it's pretty instant, do you still feel that there is some spoiling of the sample because it's just exposed and it's not in the body? Do you think there's going to be some changes?
That can happen, but it's quick and easy just to do another one. That's the difference. Whereas when it's a venous draw, it can be quite a drawn-out affair.
Yes. Is there any way you could send us a short video of something or a couple of slides so we could show the people what you're talking about? That'd be really interesting to overlay onto the video. Okay.
No.
Well, Helen, you've been brilliant. I knew you would be. It was so great to meet you. And believe it or not, we've not connected since that time back in April. So this was a real conversation where I'm genuinely interested. And I hope everybody that's been listening, you found it fascinating too.
Thank you very much for having me, Stephen.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.